and welcome to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts with me, Steve Penny. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to some great people. I hope you enjoy listening in. Thank you. Today I'm catching up with Carl Platt, a former colleague of mine from my time in the Middle East. We have a great conversation and I'm really looking forward to seeing where we go. I know what you do, and why, but I don't know why you do it. So your professional career, how did you get started doing the building services side of things, and what drove you in that path?
Well, I fell into it, as I think I said earlier on, lots of serendipitous moments. I never intended to be an engineer. My life direction was I was going to be what they used to call a commercial artist, or what they now call a graphic designer, because I liked art and I was good at art, and I wanted to do that. But then decided I didn't want to make art my career because I enjoyed doing art. And if I was put under time pressure and things like that, then
takes the enjoyment away.
Yeah, but I was always good at technical drawing. But I eventually started life off as an apprentice electrician. That's how I started. Did my apprenticeship, got my indentures, moved from the Northwest into Cambridge as an electrician. And it was while I was in Cambridge, again, got made redundant back in the early 80s when there was the other cull at the time. Found a job with a company who were looking for an electrician who'd had drawing experience. Mm-hmm. I'd spent my apprenticeship in the drawing office. Fell into that as a designer, but that was more, they were designing and building modular operating theatres and medical equipment.
Yeah.
So that was my first foray into the healthcare industry, and worked with them for a while. Then went back working for a company for research and development. That again, we got to a point we'd almost exhausted where we were going with the kit. It was they were just rubber extrusion machines, but they would like do remolds and stuff like that. Yeah. And then went back into contracting as a contract engineer for a contractor. And it was there while I was doing that, I was working on a project in Cambridge. I got to meet a guy called Ron Fish, David Bedwell and Partners in Royston. Mm-hmm. And they were the design engineers, and I was the contracts engineer. And after about 3 or 4 months on that project, he said to me, "You're too good for this. Why don't you come and work for me as a designer?" I said, "Well, I've never done anything like that." He said, "I reckon you could do that." So that's what I did. And that's how I got into building services engineering. It was just that. So I went in, learned the job as I went along, applied my electrical engineering and my drafting skills that I'd done before. And that was the day when we all drew up our own drawings with ink pens and all of that.
I remember those days.
They were great. I love doing my own stuff. I've got to, because you kept control of it. You know, you did your own costings on the project for the client, how much it was going to be and all of that stuff. So I liked all that all-round stuff. You know, we designed everything. Fire alarm systems, lift system, everything. Yeah. Before we all became specialists. So I did that for a while and then sort of went through various companies, and I ended up at a company called the Rolton Group over at Northampton. So I went working for them. I was with them about 9.5 years, and they just said to me, "Look, we'd like you to become an associate director, but you need to be chartered." Yeah. And I said, "Well, for me to be chartered, I need to have a degree. And I don't have a degree because I've been doing the job for donkey's years just through experience." Yeah. And I finally, long story short, convinced them to put me on a day release at University of Hertfordshire, or Hatfield Poly as it used to be called. And I did my degree there. Got it with honours. Nice. And then just before I came out, I then left them and went to WSP as a senior engineer. And because I just decided I didn't want to be an associate director, really. I quite enjoyed the design. I like the engineering. I love engineering. And I suppose that's what I found that it was something I liked, and it was something I felt I was pretty good at. And a number of people said, you're good at it. Yeah. And it was at Rolton's that I had a couple of architects come up to me and said, "Look, if you went on your own, we'd work with you. Or why don't we form our own company, a multidiscipline company?" But I didn't have the kahunas you had to go off and do it on your own.
Or the stupidity, I think, is the better phrase, to be honest.
Well, I just like the security of working for somebody else. And then they found the work and gave it to you. So that, there was There's that benefit to it to some extent.
Yeah.
And they put me through the degree, and they say, I then went to WSP, was there about 3 or 4 months, and they promoted me up to associate director over the existing associate who'd been there donkey's years, and he was not a happy chicken.
I can imagine. People don't like that kind of thing.
No, well, my first review he did, and the second round of reviews I did his, which was a bit difficult because he just walked in the room and said, "There's no point in me being in here, is there?" So why is that? He said, "Well, I ain't going anywhere, and you being my boss now proves it." But we did work it out. There was a point in time where he just wouldn't talk to me for about 6 months. He would listen. He would talk to me to do work, but apart from that, there was nothing. Even though he sat on the other side of the screen from me, and but we worked it all out. And it was there while at Barry Snedman's from WSP, I was asked to go out to the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I then thought, right, I need to be chartered.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I joined CIBSE, and I got chartered at the same time. So although I'd got a degree in building services, I looked at doing it with the IEE as it was at the time, or the IEIEIO now. And
yes.
They just said, well, we don't recognise your degree, but we can get you in on granddad rights because you're old enough and been doing it long enough.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, no, I'm a chartered engineer. I'm a building services engineer, so I'll join CIBSE.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I got in with that one quite easily and quite quickly, and sorted all that before I went to WSP Middle East. And it was then, I think, it all started to really take off a little bit. After leaving there, coming back to the UK, I then started getting roles as directors and team leaders, running around the countryside, running teams. I mean, when I was working for Kia's, I was working for Michelle at that point, and they were bought out by Kia's. And I'd got teams all over the country, number of engineers, probably about 40, 50 engineers, I think, around the country.
Yeah.
And that just got too much. And it was at that point I came home one day and said, so I just don't want to do this anymore. It's just not where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I like engineering. That's where I like to be. And I'd met a few guys on my journey who'd also made that very same decision. And I could see the appeal of it.
Yeah.
They're getting a reasonable salary. They weren't getting paid mega bucks, but getting a reasonable salary. But they weren't taking, the only responsibility with the taking was the quality of their work.
Yeah.
And that for me was it. I knew I could do the job. I knew I was a good engineer. I knew I could design it. And it was like when I was at Battersea Power Station and I picked that designer. I said, I'm not going to be here forever, but before I leave here, this job will be right.
Yeah.
And it was. When we finished with it, it was a good design. It was a good engineered design. We got it right. We squeezed it, pulled it, tickled it, worked really hard. It got a lot of abuse from the other professions, the architects and civil structural engineers, because we were so behind with our designs to keep up with them.
Yeah.
But just kept my head down and just cracked on with it and got it done. And, for me, that's what it's been all about. And I was once asked in a management course, and they said, if you were at the end of your career, what is it you want to be remembered for? And my response at the time, you got all the guys go, well, I want to, be the best engineer in the country. I want to like to design on this or worked on this. My response was, I want people who have worked with me and who have known me say he was a good bloke.
Yeah.
Knew his stuff. And that's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted, is just to know I've done a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true of anybody that's a bit selfless about what they do. I think your focus isn't on the glory for you; it's on doing a good job and being told you've done a good job. There's a lot of people. I mean, that one of the reasons I didn't call the business that I've got Steve Penny Engineering is I'm not chasing that glory. I just want to be the business to be known for doing a good job, and that's the satisfaction that I get out of that. Is that people recognise we do a good job, but that's all I'm aiming for. And I think you do that, you end up being a much better engineer or a much better person as well from that perspective.
You're right. And I went for years. I did live that time of having that imposter syndrome, and I've worked around so many people.
Proud member of that group.
I think if you know what you're doing, you do. Because you look at people and you think, how do they get into that position? And they usually got into it because they bullshit the way in.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily good at what they do. They've just found a way in.
Yeah.
And, I just thought, I just want to, I like engineering. It's the one reason why, even now, after 4 years of being retired, I'm still active on LinkedIn. I still talk to people. My CV still gets used on projects for the Middle East, for bids of the Middle East and that, from people I know from WSP. And I still get interested in it. And I still get people phoning me up and saying, look, could you give me a bit of advice on this? And I do, and I'm quite happy to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a great profession. It's a lovely profession. Yeah. And with the building services engineer, I've always likened it. I've always said to people that when you've got a design team for a facility, whatever facility it is, the architect will come up with a design to try and interpret the client's aspirations. The structural engineer will go in there to make sure it doesn't fall over.
Yeah.
Pretty much,
yeah.
Simplistic, but it's pretty much. The building service engineer brings that building to life.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you can't argue that. And when you hear people, and I'm not going to name any names, but you hear of people, activists out there shouting about sustainability and all of that sort of stuff and, good designs and all that. I made a comment once about the most famous person, a young lady who was making comments, and somebody said to me, well, that's just a bit, what makes you give you the right to criticise her? I said, 40 years of doing sustainable buildings.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot of people now that have created. Yeah, actually, there's a lot of people who've created a role for themselves as a sustainability engineer. But I find that is really disingenuous. I think, as a building services engineer, your responsibility is to design sustainable systems. You shouldn't be designing a system that's inefficient, because if you are, you'll be designing it badly. And I had the pleasure of working with a guy called Patrick Bellew for a company called Atelier 10 for about 3 or 4 years, which is where I met my wife, Chrissy. And he was well ahead of his time in sustainability. I was working with him in the early 90s or mid 90s, and he was already focusing on how you get the building to work for the services rather than against the services. And looking at building orientation, looking at glazing types, looking at external shading, all of that stuff that you employ a sustainability engineer to do for you. Patrick was doing that as part of the job, and it wasn't an extra service he added on. It was just how you did a good job. And I've sort of tried to carry that with me wherever I've gone, that, you focus on the building and making the building work as a whole, not does the heating system work, does the lighting system work, does the drainage work. You try and make it all work together, because you get a much better outcome.
It's like a living organism.
It is, absolutely, yeah. It is.
Brain work or heart work or your liver work. They've all got to work together and do what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And it's also a bit like with value engineering. Whenever I've sat in a meeting and say, right, we've got to cut somewhere, we need to do some value engineering. And they turn to me and say, well, I can't do anything. And they go, why not? I say, because I've already done it. That's what you pay me for, to value engineer this project. What you're asking me to do is, what can I cut out?
Yeah. To reduce the level of service that you've asked for.
Yeah, what one anymore? And for me, it all comes in. That's all down to sustainability, having it value engineered. So, I think it's important, and I do think that building service engineers are being recognised more, that they need to be involved right at the beginning of the project.
Yeah,
talk to you.
Yeah, I think that's something that's a bit slow over here, that you'll get a master plan and a concept done by an architect, and there'll be no plant rooms, there'll be no vertical risers, there'll be nothing that allows for any of the services to go in. And then you turn up as a service engineer and everyone hates you because you could change the plans.
Yeah. No, and I'm so many times. The best architects I've ever worked with are the ones who turn and said, how much space do you need?
Yeah, and they're so rare.
And it is rare, but
so
I could actually name them by name, the ones who have ever said that to me.
Yeah.
So, and I would work with them again and again and again, because they just think the right way.
Well, I had one project over here when I was doing the healthcare work over here for one of the companies I worked for. And when we were bidding for it, I could see that they hadn't allowed, on the concept design they had from the architects, there was no plant space anywhere for a hospital. There was nothing. So when I put the bid together, I did some concept stuff that showed the sort of plant space they'd need, but the document that came out for bid said the concept phase is complete, so I excluded the concept phase fee. because your concept's already done, you said, but I know it doesn't work. So if you want me to do it, I'm going to charge you for doing it on top of my fee. But because I'd actually already identified that I knew the concept wasn't done from a services perspective, when the client came back to us and said, yeah, you're going to win the work, but you obviously know the concept's not right, so that's included in your fee. Otherwise, you don't get the work. It's like I shot myself in the foot because I demonstrated my understanding of the project better than anybody else had. And I ended up losing $8,000 on the job because they wanted me to redo the concept.
But I don't. I'll say I never quite get it why people are like that. I always say I don't know, and I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but I know like over here, 55% of the total construction cost is the MEP.
Yeah.
So if that's going to be the case, then surely we need more than just a shoebox to put all our plant in. It makes common sense, doesn't it? Why can't they see? And that's what always threw me.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. We
end up getting the lowest. I don't know what the fees are like in the UK now, but over here, services is the lowest fee. So you'll have a project manager at 1.5% to 2%. You'll have the architect at 2% to 3%. You'll have us, if we're lucky, at 1%, maybe 1.5% for all of the services. And it's mad, isn't it? It is mad because like you say, you're designing 50% of the job. You're getting a fraction of the fees. But
on healthcare. I always found that frustrating on healthcare, but I think the UK is getting a bit better. I think when we were out in the Middle East and I was doing projects that were US design regs, that was down to about 40%, I think, 45%, even down to 35% of the construction costs, because they just weren't as focused on it as we are in the UK with the guidelines here. So, but yeah, it was interesting how that worked. But yeah, it's been interesting to have gone out there and seeing what it was all about. I did try and get a copy of the New Zealand and the Australian regs, but I couldn't find it.
Well, you won't get New Zealand regs because there aren't any. That's the issue in healthcare over here, is that there's no standardisation at all. There's when I first came over here, they've changed it very recently. When I first came over here, there were 22 district health boards in a country of 4.5 million people.
Wow!
And every one of those boards had a slightly different way of doing healthcare design.
That is bonkers.
It is absolutely bonkers. It was totally insane. And they would not agree between them on what standards to use. They all wanted their own little bit of it to be different, which meant that when you were bidding for a job, it was different every single time. And
that's what I don't get. That's what I don't get.
Well, I think the HDMs in the UK are fantastic because they cover the whole country. And you know that wherever you are in the country, it's going to be the same standard. And it makes life so much easier.
You get the derogation, but
Yeah. But the basic intent is the same everywhere. Whereas over here, you could be using ASHRAE, you could be using an HTM, or you could be using somewhere in between the two, or you could be using the Australian healthcare standards, or you could be using a mix of all of them.
Crikey.
Which is just horrendous. It's just so hard to plan.
I don't even know how you can police it.
You can't really, because the standards are different everywhere.
Yeah. So I made the mistake with an architect once about hospitals. I said, you do realise that when you design a hospital, if you're trying to get all the adjacencies, every hospital has the same adjacencies. You need to have certain rooms next to certain areas and all of that sort of stuff. If you're working to that premise that there are common adjacencies and there are common travel routes and common requirements, why doesn't every hospital look the same? And you'd think I'd summoned up the devil. Well, you can't do that. They'll all look like boxes. I said, you're in there to get better, not to sit in a building and go, well, this building looks nice. Aren't you?
You are. Yeah, you are. I mean, to a large extent, yeah.
Reasonable experience, but for me, if I was ill in bed in a hospital, all I want is a nice room with a nice TV, or maybe a music system that I could relax to.
Yeah.
I don't care what the outside of the building looks like. If I had if I could get out and about and there was a garden or a balcony, then fine. But the actual working guts of a hospital should never change.
No,
they do.
That's where the idea of a modular design and sort of it works well for a hospital, because you know that the spaces need a certain area every time, that they need to be in a certain layout every time. So using that modular design approach would be a massive benefit in healthcare. But architects want the buildings to be their legacy, so they have to look like one of their buildings.
So same with every
function
building,
follows form, not form follows function. Unfortunately, is the biggest thing there. Another question I'd ask really is there a point in time where you've learned or heard something that's really changed your perspective on those around you or on the world itself?
The only thing, the one thing that stuck in my mind more than anything else, and it was always the thing I applied in healthcare particularly, and when I was out in the Middle East as well, was, as you say, hospitals vary in what they look like. Hospitals vary in how they work. But the one thing that always made me think, how am I going to design this, was what's the starting point? Mm-hmm. And the starting point is a very unwell person lying on a bed.
Yep.
Somebody once said to me, that's where it should all start from. How are you going to make that building work for that person? Hospitals, we know, have lots of people, but let's start with, and it's all down to
a patient. Yeah,
starts with the patient. But it's like everything else. It's whenever I've had guys in my teams who are struggling with anything, I always said to them, go back to basics, go back to fundamentals, start there, make it, what's the easiest thing you can do? And then make that work for what you're trying to achieve. Because we have a tendency to over-design and overthink an issue.
Yeah.
And you just got to get back to where you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And it's what I call in my meetings my blue dolphin moment.
Right.
And I'll tell you why. I sat in a meeting years and years and years ago working on a leisure centre. Mm-hmm. And the client and the architect had spent 30 to 35 minutes discussing what colour they were going to tile the dolphin on the bottom of the swimming pool. And I said, well, aren't dolphins blue? Wouldn't it look great with blue in blue water? And they both went, oh, yeah. And that's my blue dolphin moment.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a meeting, or what used to be in a meeting, and it was dragging on from superfluous reasons, I used to just tap on the table and go, blue dolphin, blue dolphin. And everybody used to go, what do you mean blue dolphin? And I'll explain that story. And they all go, okay, yeah, get the point. But it's that getting back fundamentals. What basically
Focus.
Is it you're trying to do?
Yeah.
And for me, that realization for me was what drove the way I approached my designs and my engineering, the way I dealt with everything.
I think similar, probably along a similar line, I would say that one of the things I've found with a lot of the engineers that I've worked with is that they go into a meeting having already decided what the answer to all of their questions is without actually asking the questions. And they make fundamental mistakes because they don't ask those questions that they should be asking. And I try and instill in the people in my team that asking the questions is the absolute first thing you must do, because if you don't ask all of the questions, you will get the answers wrong. And we're really good at fixing problems without actually asking the client whether they want the problem fixed.
Yeah.
Because they may not see what we see as being a problem. But, it's if you don't get that sort of start point right, as you say, if you don't get the brief right, if you don't understand what it is the client's trying to achieve out of the project, whether it's how do I care for that patient or how do I get the most number of people into this building or whatever it may be, if you don't ask that question right at the start, everything that follows on from it could be wrong.
Yeah.
And, it's just being open to asking those questions and accepting that sometimes the answers are going to be different to what you expect.
And sometimes what forward isn't right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We're all of us are fallible in some way.
Yeah. It's just not being precious about who you are and what you're doing. For me, being a building service engineer isn't about the glory and the gain. It's about getting the job right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
A happy client. And if I could walk away from every project in my life without somebody coming back to me later on saying, you really cocked that up, I've done a good job.
Yeah. I learned that quite early in my career, I have to say. I worked for the BBC for a number of years, and all of our work was for in-house departments. So you lived with the project from the moment you started working on it till 10 years later when you went back in and refurbished it again. And everyone so if you screwed up the design, the people that worked in that space knew who you were and came to your desk and complained at you. So, it wasn't like an external consultant. You couldn't do that. But because we were in-house, they just thought, oh, well, I know where he works. I'll go and have a chat to him and tell him he's wrong and his system doesn't work. And, and it made me really focus on getting that that approach right and making sure you're getting the design to meet the requirements of the people in the space. So it's cool.
Healthcare, just another one of the things I used to do was a lot of time with healthcare particularly is go and ask when you're designing the new areas, when you go and talk to the users, he's asking two questions. What do you want? And what do you really want? And that for me, you always got two different answers, but you usually get somewhere in the middle somewhere, and that always works.
I think the biggest challenge I've had with healthcare work is when you're building an MRI suite or some other suite where there's some really expensive equipment going in it, and the users do not want to choose the piece of kit until the last possible moment because they want to make sure they've got the latest design, and because they won't choose it, you don't know what the requirements are because every one of them's different.
Yeah.
It's like, for God's sake, just make your mind up, pick something. So I can design to it.
About 6 inches too small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or the power supplies are, a megawatt too small, or whatever it may be. Yeah. That you've got a major issue because the design is based on something that they've decided to change. So that was always challenging. Well, I mean, in terms of people that you've worked with, who would you say was the biggest influence on you?
Ron Fish. I mentioned him earlier on. Yeah, he was the man who got me into it and the man who gave me every confidence that I could do it. Yeah. Ron was one of those guys who wasn't going out for glory. He'd set up the company, part of the company, the M&E side of it. And he was, again, one of these people who just wanted to do a good job. Yeah. And it was that sort of thing. I've always, I kept in touch for a long time with Ron, years and decades after I left working for them. But he was probably the biggest influence. And there's a couple of architects as well that I've worked with that have changed my approach because they've been able to sort of discuss what we're trying to achieve together. And that, for me, makes things. But Ron Fish was always the man who pushed my career forward and got me going, and made me think about what it was I was trying to do.
Yeah, that's cool.
Good bloke. Bloke. Still around, apparently. I think he must be in his 80s now. He must be
he's probably 60. Still working.
He's not. No, he died on the golf course, and he was playing with his GP, and his GP brought him around. He actually died. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and when he was in his 60s, but he's still going. I spoke to his son not long ago, and he said, he's still about.
Died and came back.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. One of the questions I ask is, what do you do to get away from work to recharge? But you don't actually work now, so is there something? What's your sort of best pastime or favourite pastime in your retirement? Would you say drumming? Yeah,
I've taken up drumming. Something I've wanted to do ever since I was 17.
Yeah,
loved percussions, but never had the time, never had the money. And I just decided just over a year ago. I said to she said, we've got to find something to do in our retirement. And I said, I want a drum. She said, we'll go and get a drum kit. So I've now got, we've turned the old, well, it used to be the dining room, but prior to that it was the office. So it's now become the music room.
Okay.
Because I've got
two drums. Put a whole load of acoustic insulation on the walls.
No, but nobody can hear me, funnily enough. The room is right in the middle of the house, so none of the neighbours can hear me.
Oh, cool.
But I do have an electronic set, so I can play with headphones, which is really, really good. And I have an acoustic set, which I play when there's nobody in the house and the dog's out. It frightens the life out of the dog. She thinks it's thunder. And so I might have a thrash with that, but drumming was a thing. Yeah. When I was working, prior to that, I used to do sort of lots of physical sports. I used to do fencing. I used to do karate, and they were good levelers for me. And I used to do a lot of reading, but I don't read so much now. I'm retired, funnily enough. But I do like playing. Time. Yeah, now I've got more time. I don't do it. So it's drumming pretty much. And then we're fortunate now. We get the opportunity to go out and have lunches and stuff like that, which is quite pleasant.
Yeah, but spend time with your granddaughter as well.
When I was working, sometimes when you were doing 3-hour commutes, it's difficult to find a time to wind down.
I think that's. I mean, I did tend not to work on the commute a lot of the time because I was standing up most of the journeys, so it's hard to work when you're standing up. And I found that I would either be listening to music or I'd be reading on the train journeys. And I listen to music in the car now, but I'm lucky if I can get 4 tracks in before I get to work. It's a short journey, which is great. It's a good because it's a short journey, but I enjoyed, to some extent, having a slightly longer commute because it allowed me to decompress a bit from work before I got home. And but I have to find other ways to do that. So one of the reasons
that's a good point. I'd listen to music, definitely. I mean, music has always been a passion in my life, hence the drumming. I've always liked music. I collect vinyl. I collect loads of memorabilia. I've got loads of music memorabilia, autographs and signed copies of stuff, like I've got. When Sue reckons that when I pop it, she's going to flog all my Queen stuff that I've got, because I've got quite a lot of Queen and rare stuff and whatever. And she reckons she can buy a world cruise out of it. And she probably could.
She's obviously fairly certain you're going first then.
Well, that's right. But there might be a point. So for me, it's the owning of it. I love owning the vinyl. I've got every single Queen album original release.
Yeah.
I've got a few rare ones, even from buying albums and bootleg ones from Venezuela and places like that. Got all the autographs, Freddie's and everybody. We've seen them 4 times. Kiss is another band I like listening to.
Yeah.
I've got the collection of stuff there.
Did you go to the Live Magic concert at Nebworth Park?
Yeah, you were there.
I didn't see you there.
Well,
there's only 250,000 people there.
Yeah. I did go to that. The first one I went to see was at Bingley Hall in 1978.
Right.
And then I saw them at Milton Keynes Bowl, which is where there's an album out, Queen at the Bowl.
Yeah.
That was the one I went to. And then I saw them on the Crazy Tour at Manchester Apollo when they just played small venues. That was crazy. That was bonkers. Yeah. And that's the only one, the Crazy one is the only one I don't have the ticket stub. I've got the others.
Yeah.
Massive Queen fan, like Kiss. Just found a new band that I'm really listening to. Went and saw went down to a signing in Islington on Friday.
Right.
Signed an album, and I got the drummer to sign a set of sticks. I collect drumsticks signed by people, so I've got a set signed by Zach Starkey. Do you know who Zach Starkey is?
No, I don't actually know.
Richard Starkey's son. Do you know who Richard Starkey is?
No, this is the thread you're pulling at. You just need to tell me.
Yeah. It's Ringo Starr.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I've got a set of sticks signed by Pete Best, who was the first drummer of the Beatles.
Yeah.
I've got the drummer from Those Damn Crows I went to see the other day.
Yeah.
I've got a set of sticks signed by the current drummer of Kiss. I've got Don Powell from Slade, set of his sticks signed. So little things like unusual. And Paul Cook from Sex Pistols.
That's quite an eclectic range of drummers.
Yeah, but it's just the unusual drummers that, they're the sort of things that guarantee 10, 20 years down the road, they're going to be worth a lot more than they are now.
Yeah.
But you never mind the Bollocks album. I mean, that is now a collector's item, which I've got a copy of, and you depend on the ones you've got, they're worth thousands.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that. So I like collecting those sort of things, and they give me great pleasure, and I listen to them and catch.
Cool. Yeah, I think Chrissy and I, we've sort of trying to plan what we want to do when we get to the point of retiring, and it's the travel side of things is what we want to focus on. I think see as much of the world as we can. And one of the reasons for moving away from New Zealand is everywhere is really a long way away from New Zealand, and it makes it really expensive and time consuming to go anywhere.
Imagine, it'd be great. You're back in the middle of Europe, so you'd be fine there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the point. You
can
get on a train. You can get on a train, or you can drive anywhere or whatever. So we're looking forward to that, I think. A couple of other things just to close this out, because I know we've been on the call for a while now, is if there was a piece of advice you could give your 20-year-old self, what would it be, and why would you give that advice?
Ooh, good question. It would be the one I said earlier on. It's okay to say no.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the day that sort of epiphany happened was the day I think my life and my approach to working life changed dramatically. Yeah. The better.
Yeah.
You're probably the same. You spent years when you're first doing it trying to just do stuff to make people happy.
Yeah.
And trying to say the right thing, so what they want to hear, which wasn't necessarily always what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think doing that was the best thing for me in everything.
Yeah.
I just now go, no, sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Or I'll do it, but something's got to drop. What do you want me to drop?
Yeah. Yeah. Having the bravery and the confidence to say, actually, there's a limit to what I can do. I'm only here to do this number of hours, and I can't do everything in this number of hours. So which bit of it don't you want me to do is something that it takes a long time to learn, because you are right. When you first start, you want to impress the people you work with, so you'll do whatever they ask, even if it means you're working until 10 o'clock at night, and it's not sustainable, and you end up not doing your best work because you're tired.
Yeah. And the other one is it's okay to ask a question, however stupid you think it's.
Yeah.
So it's things like that, I think, and you are better than you think you are.
Yeah.
It's just those
little insights into your perception of yourself and your perception of the people around you. I think that you only get through experience. That's cool. Right, yeah. Very.
I just sort of said, well, that'd be good. Let's do that then. And so we went back, but I said, but don't bring me back just to make me redundant, which they did.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, WSP went through a huge amount of turmoil. I mean, I know that I hated my last my timing going over there was absolutely appalling. I turned up in October of 2008, and then the bloody GFC turned up the following day almost. And I spent, what was it, November, December, January, February, March and April every month with a list of 30 people that I had to escort out the building.
I know. I recall all that because I turned up on January the 25th, 2009.
Yeah.
And as you say, there was people walking out with all their belongings in a box.
Yeah.
I said to staff in HR, I said, look, before I even park myself anywhere, please tell me I've got a job.
Yeah.
Because I remember
you coming in. I couldn't, but I just couldn't believe that they were still bringing people in when they were laying so many people off. It just felt wrong.
Well, her response to me was, there's only one person in this company in WSP Middle East who's definitely got a job, and that's you. Because we need you to bring the healthcare work in to try and boost up, because there's nothing else going on at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I was sort of asked to go over there. But it wasn't pleasant, because I went out there on a package I wasn't 100% happy with.
Yeah.
On the understanding that come the bonuses in sort of April, May, I'd be included in the shuffle. And of course, as you March, they cut everybody's salary by about 12.5%, 15%. And so suddenly my outgoings were more than my income.
Yeah.
And that's when I panicked a bit, and had to do a lot of clever thinking, but managed to get it sorted in the end.
Yeah.
So that we were back in the black, so to speak. Obviously, the reason I stayed then until 2010.
Yeah.
But I've got to say, I do miss working out there, and I did miss working out with WSP out there. They were a good crowd.
I've got to be honest, when I first got over there, I absolutely loved it. I thought the projects they were working on and the people I was working with were fantastic, but it just really rapidly went down the toilet, unfortunately.
Well, I think the whole world did, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, it did. But I think it was weird in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in particular, because they just seemed to stop overnight. It was a little bit slower elsewhere in the world, but I think the way that it collapsed over there was quite shocking. Now, I remember we was working on that Dubai Expo Plaza project when I first got over there, and we were delivering the concept design on that project, which was, it was a massive project. It was 2 hotels, 2 office towers, 2 shopping malls, a whole load of restaurants, swimming pools, bars, and God knows what else, as a single project, which I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And we delivered the concept design. I went to deliver the concept design, which was, I don't know, about 2,500 drawings and God knows how many documents, and went over to the client, which is one of the government-backed clients over there, and all the doors were locked.
Oh.
It's like the whole team had been sacked the previous day. The entire team.
Was quite ruthless. Yeah.
They were absolutely ruthless. Yeah. So we found a security guard who let us in, and we walked through the building to try and find anybody in the building, and there was nobody in the building. So we ended up just dumping all the stuff on the desks. All the computers were gone, all the screens were gone, all the phones were gone. It's like, what the hell has happened here?
Yeah.
It's really like, wow. They don't muck around.
No, they don't. And I know we were out there just before COVID.
Yeah.
And I've never, ever seen the Sheikh Zayed empty in my life. And it was.
It was, yeah.
No, I was walking about the only person walking about it. It was, So I imagine it was exactly the same back in 2008-9. All the stories about how many cars were dumped out at Abu Dhabi airport. It was over 100,000 cars out there at one point, which is, that's just like, it ended up just being a dust-covered car park full of Maseratis and Range Rovers and God knows what else. It's just unreal. I know. Where our friends lived in Dubai, it was like there was all cars all covered in sand for years, just never got moved, just sat there and all stuff like that. But crackers. But for me, sort of, I was in a way, I was fairly fortunate, because once I got back to the UK, even though WSP made me redundant, they made the whole of the business development team. So the me as healthcare sector lead went, commercial sector lead, education sector lead, all of them went. But it was at a time when, it was bad in the economy. WSP were trying to shed people, but all the other companies were looking for business development people.
What do they say when there's no work? The budget you don't cut is your advertising budget, which is what BD is really. Now, if you've got no work, then the last thing you do is get rid of the people who are good at winning it, because because where's the work going to come from, But yeah, I mean, I had a real frustration with WSP and with ACOM when I started working for them over here, in that they didn't see business development as utilised time.
Right.
They saw it as a complete overhead. And it's you're doing
that's
time.
How WSP.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The WSP and ACOM, I think, both very similar in that way. And that, so you do a lot of hours on business development, and then you get criticised because your utilisation was low. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm out winning work for everybody else. I'm bringing work in. I'm just not working on it because I'm bringing it in.
Yeah, exactly right. And I was the same with WSP. I then went on to Halcrows, that then became part of CH2M Hill, big American group. And that was the same. All your BD stuff was seen as an overhead. And, they were saying, well, look, your utilisation and efficiency is really low. What are you going to do about it? Well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to bring in work, or do you want me to work on work? It's entirely up to you. I don't mind.
Yeah,
you make the decision. But but we were fortunate as a group from the BD team at WSP. We all walked into other jobs straight away. Virtually, admittedly, I had to go over to work out of Swindon, so I was doing a Monday to Friday commute. Yeah, which was a big ache.
Yeah,
no, but so I did that for a short while, and then decided to shut the team down there. My team down in there. We were the only M&E team in the whole of Halcrow stroke CHM that was making any money. They decided to split us all up and move us all around to all the different offices, and a load of them left.
Yeah,
I ended up in Hammersmith, at the office working at Hammersmith, so commuting there every day from Cambridge. So that was in the end. I can't do this. This is just too much.
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm not spending my whole life driving to and from or getting to and from work all the time. I'm spending as much time commuting as I was working.
Yeah.
And in the end, I eased back and got to a point where I just decided that I just didn't want to do management anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But, it was, again, it's this thing about efficiency and utilisation. You're busy running the team, so you're not doing much work.
Yeah.
And they want to know why you're not being sufficient. And in the end, I just sort of said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I joined the industry to be a designer. I like designing where I want to be. And that's what I did. I stepped back. I went back into a sort of like associate director's role, associate role, which I did working at Battersea Power Station on the redevelopment of the production, which is a fabulous job. But again, it was a 3-hour commute each way.
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing I can say about New Zealand is that I think the longest commute I've had is about 25 minutes. And people complain. People complain about that. They do complain about that. I think the thing that really made me laugh is they were complaining that there was a path that was shut because of a road slip, which added 20 minutes onto people's journeys, and everyone was up in arms. It was front page news in the newspaper. Like,
really,
you can lose that on a set of traffic lights in London.
Yeah, no, you
can't. It's not 20 minutes in the entire journey. So it went from 15 minutes to 35 minutes, and they were absolutely losing their shit over it. Just like, this is totally unacceptable. The government should spend more money on the roads. Like, oh my God, really? Get a life.
I never got with the UK why people accepted commuting the way they have. It was an accepted thing that you'd have a long commute, and you'd work on the commute. You wouldn't get yourself to work unless you were driving all the way, which I did to Dartford a few times when I worked down there. But it was, you sit on the train and you get your laptop out and you work. And I never.
So your working days 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. And then when you go home, if you haven't finished what you've done back in the office, you carry on in the evening till you go to bed, sort of thing. Yeah. And I never did understand that. And it was that at that point, I think, Sue said to me, look, you're doing too much. Yeah. You need to step back. I suppose a bit in a situation like with some of your podcasts on men's mental health and all of that.
Yeah.
There was that eureka point where I thought, don't want to do that anymore. I've had enough.
Yeah.
And then got a very good paid job at Lang O'Rourke, working in their R&D. But again, when I first went down there to Dartford, it was a 50-minute drive.
Yeah.
which soon ended up, after about 6 to 8 months, of being 2 hour.
Yeah.
And the M11 has always got something falling over or catching fire or doing something.
I remember getting caught in a snowstorm on the M11.
Yeah, not the best place, because you can't get off it.
No, it was going up one of the hills on the M11, and a truck in front had lost traction and started sliding and stopped diagonally across the motorway. And that was it. You can go anywhere. There was nowhere to get off. There was nowhere near a slip road. He was right the way across the carriageway, so you couldn't even drive around it. And was there for about 8 hours.
And what do the Brits do? They don't complain about it. They just turn everything off and go to sleep.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Turn the car on every hour or so to warm it up again, because it was freezing cold. But
the drive to get out of that rat race was just under 4 years ago now. We became, I think I said to you on one of my emails, is that we became legal guardians to our granddaughter when she was 15 years old. She's just turned 5 now.
Wow.
And it was at that point I thought, right, enough. I spent most of my kids' life growing up, because I was working and commuting like you expected to.
Yeah.
And I just sort of went into work one day and said, I'm going to resign. And he went, well, why? I said, because I want to retire early.
Yeah.
So I've got enough to do it now.
Yeah.
Although I had planned to stay at Langs for a couple of years because their pension plan was astronomically brilliant. But I just said, no, I want to be there when she grows up and spend the time. I do. My pleasurable parts of the day now are getting up in the morning, walking her to school, which is about, it's about 10, 15 minutes walk from me, but when I've got her with me, it's like 30, 35 minutes. Little legs and little feet. Yeah. And then pick her up in the afternoon, I should say, and bringing her back and having that time with her. It's just great. I love it. Yeah. The best thing I ever did was take an early retirement, I've got to say.
Yeah.
And I could not recommend it highly enough.
Well, that is my plan. I'm 55 this year. I want to retire before I get to 60. And
I was 59.
Part of the plan for the business is to get it to a point where it's worth some money to sell it and then stop. That's it,
Yeah.
We've got this idea that we want to move over to Italy and live in Italy in our retirement. Because why not?
Well, why not? Yeah.
If we can get enough money out of the business and sell the house that we're in without too much of a mortgage on it, it gives us enough money to buy a property and have some investments and get sort of passive income, and then just go and do what we want to do, which is travel around Europe and see all of the stuff that we never got a chance to see when we had kids when we were in the UK.
Yeah. I do know exactly what you mean. Italy was on our place. We picked 2 places that we'd like to retire to. Yeah. One was Italy, probably around Tuscany area.
Yep. Same as us, yep.
Or Norfolk.
All right, okay. There's not much difference between the two.
It's just the way of life. It's just that slower way of life in both of those areas, which I quite enjoyed. But obviously, we plan to retire without having any kids.
Yeah.
So now we've got Isabel with us, and I wouldn't be without her for the world. Yeah. She does time where we are because we're sort of available for the greater family, both the maternal side and we're obviously us on the paternal side. So she gets to see mum and dad, granddad, and all those, and cousins and whatever elsewhere.
Yeah.
So we do that, and we can't. Because of the guardianship, we can't go out of the country for more than, I think it's 3 months at a time. So we're tied. So that's the thing.
Yeah.
But, we're fortunate. We've paid the mortgage off.
Yeah.
We have a second place that we rent out. We've been renting that now for 20 years. We've paid the mortgage off on that. We bought a home. We paid that off cash, then sold it for profit.
Nice.
Which surprised considerably, and it was that allowed the spreadsheet that I put together about my pension. The bottom line, when it went green, I could go, right, I can go now.
Yeah,
and that's what I did. But the best advice I ever had for being able to think about retiring was from my dad. When I was 16 and I started work, he said, right, you started work, start pension now.
Yeah, I never got that advice, and that's part of the issue. What I've got is I don't have a pension fund that's worth anything really, and the one I've got is about $250,000 New Zealand dollars at the moment, and that's just nowhere near enough to do anything with. So that's why I decided I wanted to do something different with work and start the business, and hopefully, get the business to a point where it's self-sustaining without me being there every day, and use that vehicle to release some funds, and that becomes my pension fund basically. And that's what we're planning to do. But if it hadn't been for COVID, I probably would be looking at retiring this year. But COVID really slowed the growth of the business down.
Oh dear.
So
it's growing again, though, isn't it?
I started to, yeah. I mean, we've turned a corner this year, in terms of the workload. Last 18 months, I would say it's kind of been very much hand to mouth. We've just been about getting enough work every month. Whereas now I've got a couple of decent sized projects, which mean I've got work for the next 6 or 7 months. So it just changes the complexion of the business completely. You're suddenly in a position where you're not worrying about what you're going to be doing next month. You're planning what you're going to be doing in 6 or 7 months, and it just takes all of that pressure off.
Yeah, it takes a bit of a buffer, isn't it? That's a good one to have, like that.
Yeah. So
I've been watching you with interest to see how you're getting on.
I tell you, well, I don't know if I had the opportunity to do it all again. I don't know whether I would, because it has been hard work.
I can imagine.
But I think I also know now I would really struggle to go and work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Because, I've got total...
so many times of people I know who sorted out, said, they may not have wanted to do it again because it is hard work and you're full on all the time. But you're right, it's working for somebody else, and at the behest of somebody else's whims, which is the thing I found very difficult. And when I had all of that, with bosses and that who were trying to make life difficult, and I had one who was a bully. Yeah. And I developed the line when any of them, I used to have a conversation with them and he wasn't going quite nicely. I used to say to him, look, you've got to get away from the fact that I come here because I need the money. Mm-hmm. I don't. Yeah. Sometimes I did, but I never told him that. Yeah. But I look, I don't come here because I need the money. If I want to, I'll just go if I want to go. If I want to go. Yeah. And that changes people's attitudes fairly quickly.
Yeah. They know. I mean, if they think you're a valuable resource, but they don't want to tell you. Yeah. Yeah.
Or they don't want to spend the money trying to replace you. Yeah. So it's that sort of thing. So I've been fairly lucky through my career. It's lots of serendipitous moments and that, but it's having the nuts to stand up for myself to some extent.
I think that's something you learn as you get older. From my point of view, I think that when I first started working, I wouldn't say I was in awe of the people around me, but I was very nervous and sort of didn't back myself at all, really. And was if people said that I wasn't doing the right thing, then I'd agree with them, even if I felt that I was doing the right thing, because I didn't have the confidence to back myself. But in the last 20 years or so, that's changed a lot. And I call people out on their bullshit on a regular basis, which is probably why I've been made redundant twice, if I'm honest. Yeah. People don't like it when you call them out on what they're doing.
No, they don't. And it was one of those things you've seen lots of businesses, and I must admit, I've never been one to be able to do or like doing, where people shuffle and hide money to pay, Rob Peter to pay Paul and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah. And for me, the job, if by doing that, you're creating a false economy and a false impression that you're getting the job done and you're doing the job properly, and you're not. Yeah. And you've got to learn by your mistakes. And if you lose money, you've got to understand why you lost that money, and therefore don't do it again, or up your fees, or do whatever you've got to do. And that's why I say before, I was too honest, because I would actually report it how it was. Yeah. We were trying to improve it, try and get better, but there's so many guys who would just shuffle stuff around, and I never really liked that. He was a shuffler, and by the time I got to the job, they were already down a few months on getting the design out the door. And when I looked at the design, well, I just nearly cried. It was just so bad. Yeah. And I just said, it's not going to get done. But he'd already taken the money out of it. But in the end, when I walked out of that meeting and I went across the road, when I got back in about half an hour later, I went to the cafe across the road and had a coffee and had to calm down.
Yeah.
And by the time I come back in, he wasn't there, and one of the other directors was in there. And I just sat down, nobody said anything. And the next thing I know, I've been told, my line manager at the time said to me, I said to him, look, I'm really sorry about that. He said, no, he said, you did exactly the right thing. He said, I don't blame you for doing what you did. You had no right to speak the way you did. He said, and what you said was spot on. And I've just been told he's been taken off the job. And then when I decided to leave, and I handed my notice in, and he said, look, I really don't want you to go. He said, you're the only one I know I've got any confidence is doing the right job here at the site. So he said, what do I need to do to keep you? I said, look, I'm getting made a brilliant offer. I said, and the only way you can match that offer, I said, is to make me a director. And I don't want to be a director.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't want to do all the commercial stuff. I don't like doing commercial stuff. I'm not happy with it. I said, I prefer to do stuff technical. I'm a technical engineer rather than a commercial end person. So he said, well, tell me what you're getting. So I told him. He said, give me 24 hours. And he came back and he matched it, even to the point of agreeing to pay my commute costs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I'd have to pay tax on it.
Yeah.
And I said to him, well, okay, that's really good, but where will I be working? He said, I need you to stay here for the next 12 months. I went, that's where I'm going, mate. I'm really sorry. The reason I'm going. Because I don't want to do the commute anymore. It was just killing me. You know, it was just bonkers.
It is hard work, that commute. I did it for most of my career from 16 to 40. That was a 2-hour each way commute every day, and massive amount of my time spent on trains. And like you said, I didn't see any of my kids grow up really. It wasn't. And when I went to Dubai, it got worse because Chrissy and the kids initially stayed in the UK, and then when the shit hit the fan a month after I got there, they decided to stay in the UK rather than come over because it was so uncertain. So I ended up really living in Dubai for 2 years on my own, which was hard work.
I hadn't realised that. The times that Sue and the kids came back here, I never liked that, and that was only for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah,
I never liked that, and I really just didn't want to do that.
No, well,
I came over, it was horrible.
Yeah, I found the biggest challenge I found is that I was over there as a married person, but without my wife. And so I didn't fit into the married group of people because I didn't have my wife with me. So I was always on my own, and I wasn't single, so I couldn't go out with the single people really. So it left me in a bit of a limbo in terms of the socializing side of stuff, which was, I went out and got drunk. So, got over it that way, which wasn't really very healthy.
Stayed over with us because we had Kevin Gow come over to us for dinner a number of times.
Yeah. Kev's a good guy. I'm still in touch with Kev. He's a good guy.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah. I think I caught up with him the other day, funny enough.
Yeah.
But you probably see me put some of these political messages out on LinkedIn, which I do on Facebook.
I've seen a few of them, yeah.
Kevin always comes back with a comment, which is quite funny. But yeah, I mean, the problem is my wife says I've got too much time on my hands now, so I can think of it. I will just ignore him. But
nothing wrong.
But it passes the time he's amused.
It does.
So.
And the last question I wanted to ask is there one place that you've never been to that you really want to go to?
Well, there's a couple, actually. New Zealand is one of them.
Right.
But my biggest place I've always wanted to go to, we were going to go until COVID, we booked it and everything, is Japan.
Oh, right. Okay.
Love to go to Japan. I've got a fascination for lots of ancient Japanese stuff. So, for me, the drive is go to Japan because I want to go to Osaka Castle.
Yeah.
If I could own something, I'd own a genuine 18th century suit of samurai warrior armour. I'd love that. If I win the lottery, I would have a standing there. I love it, all that, the genuine samurai food.
Yeah.
But yeah, Japan and New Zealand were the two places I want to go. I've got people I know in New Zealand, funny enough, so we've been involved to, but and I've got friends out in Australia as well. But,
if you're planning that trip, make sure it's before 5 years' time because I won't be here with any luck.
No, yes, I know what you mean. But no, Japan is probably the one place I've always wanted to go.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of traveling, Sue and I. We've done, been to various places and done lots of little things and the little things like going to Freddie Mercury's house on Zanzibar last year. That was quite a cool one to do.
Yeah, nice.
The family home and things like that. And we have travelled quite a lot and we've done quite a lot because we had the boys late. I was 40 when we adopted the boys.
Yeah.
And they were 11 months old. And prior to that, a lot of the holidays we went on, which we considered as just holidays, were actually quite a lot of people's holidays of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And we were quite lucky because we hadn't got the kids. We both had reasonable careers at that point in time. So, we've done things like the Eastern Orient Express from Bangkok to Singapore.
Oh, wow.
And that was phenomenal. I'll do that again tomorrow. That was brilliant.
Yeah, that's something that Chrissy said a few times she'd want to do that Orient Express trip.
Got to do it. It is, even if you break the bank, just go and do it. It was the best 3 or 4 days I've ever spent on a holiday because it doesn't take long to do it. But it is pure opulence and it's just wonderful. Great thing. But that's worth it. So we've done that and we've done transatlantic crossings on boats and stuff like that. So we've done all right. Wow. We've done all right. But Japan's
hands on the list.
That stepping stone that I would love to. But on my bucket list.
Cool. Anything else you want to share before we stop this?
Good question.
So I could carry on chatting for hours, but I've actually got work to do, unfortunately.
Well, Sue said to me, "You've done in an hour." We probably haven't. I think the old adage, and I think it's an important one, and I say it to my lads, and that you work to live.
Yeah. You
don't live to work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's an easy statement to say, and it's a flippant throwaway statement I've heard lots of people say. But if you think about it, it could help you make some of the decisions in your life.
Yeah, I think that certainly it came to me, that realization came to me probably fairly late on. I was actually working for the event of 9/11, and I was in work on a Sunday trying to get a big document out on my own because nobody else was willing to come in and work, and I ended up getting quite ill and ended up being in hospital for that following week because I was so stressed out with trying to get stuff done and just wasn't keeping up with things. So I ended up being in hospital for about a week and really quite ill. And the realization came to me at that point that, I could have died in that office and nobody would have found me till the Monday.
Yeah.
And, my wife would have been frantic and, nobody would have benefited from that. And the work would still be there and the work would still get done. And if you don't take things seriously and really focus on your own health, then, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So the
graveyard is full of indispensable people.
Absolutely right. Yeah, it is. And every one of those businesses is still going on without the indispensable person. It's very true. What a happy note to finish on. Well, thanks, Carl. It's been great catching up with you after such a long time. I do
really enjoyed it.
You've enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah. And I'll let you know when I get this all edited together. I'm trying to get a few of them together so I can have a good run of them coming out. So I'll let you know when it's being posted, and I'll stick the link up on LinkedIn and everything. So yeah,
I look forward to it. No, it's been really good to catch up with you, Steve. It's good to see you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. New Zealand.
Right, look after yourself, Carl, and I'll speak to you again.
You too, mate. Take care. All the best.
Bye.
See you, buddy.
Thank you for listening to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts, with me, Steve Penny. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to sharing my next conversation with you. If you want to find out some more, please do get in touch, and maybe we can have you on in a future show. Thank you.